afternoon. Today is September the 17th, 2019, and I'd like to welcome you all to our monthly work session. We're going to discuss some interesting topics, and the first one is Title I schools. So Dr. Cantalupo and Tara Rarity, please come forward.
Good afternoon, Dr. Bowden, members of the board. And we had an introduction, but just once again, this is Amy Donner over here, our wonderful grant specialist, and Tara, our supervisor of Title I and other things. So we provided an overview of the Title I program, and I'm going to start there. Then Tara's going to go into the spreadsheet and talk a little bit about the expenditures, and we'll take any questions from there. So it's a little bit interesting how this all works when we make what we call cuts to who will be the Title I schools. So first, if you can see in the first three bullets, any school where 75% of the students are on free and reduced lunch, that's a federal cut. Then, several years ago, Sarasota County actually chose a cut, and that was 63%. So any school that has 63% or more of their students would be designated as Title I. Then every year we look at a spreadsheet like Tara has and much more detailed documentation, and we look at the schools' percentage of free and reduced lunch. We look at patterns of funding. We look at programs we have in place at those schools. And from there, given multiple scenarios, and mind you, we don't usually have the total allocation while we're doing all of this, there's some projections going on. We decide, the administration decides how we are going to and which schools would be chosen Title I this year. There's a lot of thought going to it, and again, prior history is important because there are programs that have been on Title I services for a number of years. Programs are in place, and you don't want that sort of yo-yo effect, especially when you get down to the wire of who is funded and who is not. So one of the caveats, of the many caveats of Title I, is that that money is designated to provide impact. So you could say, well, let's do an even distribution of all of this money. But if you did such a thing, then you wouldn't be able to provide that educational impact for the schools that needed it. And as I said, we can't negate history. If you start providing, let's say, an intervention specialist at a site from Title I that is above and beyond what they normally would receive, and then the next year you pull that away, but they've already set up programs around this, and this is a very kind of simple example. You don't want to really do that either. So a lot goes into the choice of who is Title I and who is not. As you can see, the total allocation was 7.7. That was a reduction from the prior year of 7.9 million. And Tara's, and again, it's a process. It seems so simple here in these few statements, but it takes quite a bit of doing to figure out who's going to be on services and who is not.
So that comes out, if we've got 15 schools, that's about $500,000 per school?
Well, you can see on the spreadsheet in the back.
Okay.
And Tara's going to go over how that allocation was distributed.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll do that right now. You want to look to the spreadsheet?
No, we'll go back to it.
Let's just go forward.
Sorry.
Let's just continue with the presentation, and then we'll...
Well, that was next.
Yeah, we
were going to the spreadsheet.
Till the end. Thank you.
Okay, you want to start?
Fantastic. On the second page, I believe you'll see... excuse me. Thank you. On the second page, you'll see the allocations for our 15 Title I designated schools for the 1920 school year. And one of the biggest things to think about is when we look at that allocation, when we look at that $7 million allocation, it doesn't matter how many pieces of the pie we slice it into, how few or how many, that pie stays the same. So each year, our district, through the LEA allocation process, makes those decisions as to who's going to get that slice of pie, how many slices of pie and how big or how small those slices are going to be. So each year, our instructional leadership team make those difficult decisions based on some of the factors that Dr. Cantalupo just shared. Those many considerations from previous funding sources. We want to make sure that we don't create that yo-yo effect. We want to make sure that we minimize any gains or losses to schools that are designated of Title I each year. So we know that that allocation remains the same, but we do have guidance that says we have to make sure that that slice of pie is filling enough to the school to fulfill the obligation to meet the intent and purpose of the Title I program. So when we take a look at the 15 Title I schools designated for the 1920 school year, we can see that that is determined based on the number of students that are designated as free and reduced price lunch students. And that develops the school allocation. We also are required to set aside a 1% parent and family engagement for parent and family engagement for training to help parents help their children do better in school. And that gives us our total school allocation for each of the school years. We provide a tool each year for the senior leadership, and that allows them to look at the free and reduced price lunch ranges, as well as develop the per pupil allocation. So that's something that's determined each year as part of that conversation. So once schools have that allocation, we can then start to make some decisions about how those individual schools would choose to spend their dollars. And that spending or that expenditure is represented in the school-wide Title I plan, which also serves as our school-wide improvement plan. So essentially, each school is tasked with the responsibility of looking at their areas of need, their goals, their action steps, as well as the funding sources that will meet those goals, to help them meet those goals. We want to make sure that, generally speaking, the majority of those expenditures are on people. So we look at people for contracted services as well as positions for salaries and benefits. We also look at products and programs, those instructional materials that would support the goals of our Title I schools. We look at practices and professional development, so those training and support. And finally, we look at our parent and family engagement. So those are some of the expenditures that would be represented in the school's Title I school-wide program or school improvement plan. So that kind of paints a picture of our school allocations and how we get to that process, as well as what some of those allowable expenditures are.
Dad, but nothing's free. If you look at the bottom, there's heavy monitoring requirements for Title I. Tara's a master at this, as well as Amy, and they have to collect vast amounts of evidence that these activities are actually taking place, that we're using the money as we intended to, and that, of course, we don't supplant. So it's a huge program. There is a lot of money to it, but there's a lot tied to it in terms of giving back, explaining exactly how we're using the money. And so far, we've been maybe knock on wood.
So would you say that, what is the free and reduced rate this year?
For the entire district, it was about 49, am I right?
So is it less than it was last year?
We have noticed historically that our free
Wonderful.
and reduced price lunch rates, those percentages have actually decreased. So we're
Okay.
actually seeing fewer students qualifying or eligible for free and reduced price lunch rates. So that's yet another one of those considerations or factors when the senior instructional leadership team is making those decisions. Where do we draw that cutoff based on the free and reduced price lunch rates at each school?
When do we make that decision on who or how many students are on free and reduced?
Absolutely. The determination for our free and reduced price lunch rate is directly tied to our Survey 3 data. So that's generally captured in February, sometimes March, but that is based on our public school eligibility survey that's captured with Survey 3.
Eric?
I realize free and reduced lunch is based upon percentage of poverty, but I'm just throwing this out there. If we happen to have to raise the cost of meals, I understand that it only has to do with the poverty level, but that would not affect how many people are on free and reduced lunch. You don't say, okay, well, the amount of kids who can afford it go down. Does that add? Does that do anything to the multiplier? Does it go to, okay, instead of 60% of poverty, now it's 61 because you raised the rates? Does raising the food rate change that at all?
It doesn't, and in fact, that's actually our decisions for our free and reduced price lunch rate are actually driven by Food and Nutrition Services, by the Agricultural Department. So those free and reduced price lunch rates are based on the poverty levels, and those are generally set as of July 1st of every year through July 30th of the following year. So those change. It's based on the number of individuals in the household.
It just seems weird. You would think that if you raised the rates that would somehow affect it.
It is not. It's driven by the number of household size as well as the percent of poverty,
So it's 49?
It's 49.
roughly.
I just looked at it. We got it yesterday from Food and Nutrition, 49.2.
49.22.
So we'll just say 49.
Yes.
And the percentage of money that we get in our budget from the federal government is what percent?
Oh, wow.
That's a big question.
That's a good question.
Less than 10%.
It's less than 1, isn't it? It's about 1%. I think it's about 1% of the total budget.
I would be speculating at this point.
I think that it's somewhere around 1.5% of the total budget is what I remember, but I don't know. But that's a question that we need to
Certainly.
answer because I think that's important to know. We get very little from the federal government. A lot of people think we get a lot of money. We get little from the state, little from the federal. Majority of our money is from property tax.
It's in the pie chart.
Yeah.
You just don't have the.
Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to add is that how we determine, who's on free and reduced lunch is self-report. I mean, basically, they have to fill out forms, and we collect it, which is why significantly at the high school, we don't get that many forms back. But elementary schools and they have a campaign to remind students that they should come in and fill out that documentation every year.
So Mr. Robinson always has a question about one school, Garden Elementary.
I didn't ask a question.
I did.
My question isn't about Title I.
It's about Garden Elementary and some of the resources that they don't get now that they are not Title I.
My question isn't regarding Title I. My question isn't about Title I.
They received the home liaison through Title I, correct?
My question isn't about that. My question was the fact that the school went from an A to a C.
It went from a B to a C.
But it was an A before. The year before was an A. It went to A to a B to a C. And my issue was, it has nothing to do with Title I. I don't know why you want to bring this up, but I'll be happy to reiterate my position. My position is that when you have schools that fall in grades, that maybe we should look at the budget and allocate additional resources to schools that fall in grades. That was my issue. It really wasn't a Title I issue.
Well, it's my issue now, or my framing now, and I'm trying to figure out how this impacted that school because I'm concerned about that school as well. But we have to be very careful in offering services that are considered Title I services to other schools who do not meet the criteria of Title I, correct?
Can you elaborate, though, on that, just to clarify?
So I think what we're talking about is the supplement, not supplant rules that are often associated with federal funds. And we actually received new guidance as of January 2019 that's applicable only to Title I. So I wanted to be clear, it's not applicable to other federal programs or funding sources such as Title II or Title IV or Title IX, so all the titles. But it's applicable specifically to Title I. And it says that as long as Sarasota County Schools thoughtfully looks at their allocations for their funding and their staffing, and they look across the entire district, regardless if a school is Title I or not Title I, so Title I neutrality, as long as they provide those funding and the staffing equally, we have Title I neutrality. And then we don't have to ask those specific questions about supplanting. We don't have to ask at the school level how those services were funded previously. We don't have to ask how they were funded at other non-Title I schools. So the new supplement, not supplanting rules is really about methodology. It's how Sarasota County Schools allocates their funding and their staffing, and it's not about the individual school level now. So that has allowed us a great deal of freedom, more flexibility, creativity, and freedom for schools to more closely align their needs and the resources that they can purchase. So that's been something that's been very helpful to our Title I schools.
We still can't.
Mrs. Brown?
So
Still can't supplant.
so maybe this corrects the problem that was brought about. I think the question that was brought up on Garden was, why don't we have the homeschool liaison anymore? And the answer was, well, it was funded through Title I, and if it's funded through Title I, and this school is no longer a Title I, we can't pay for it out of general revenue because then we would lose the Title I. So are you saying that now that they've changed these rules, we can pay for the homeschool liaison out of general revenue, or?
The first scenario was correct. So if Sarasota County Schools had awarded a school, had allocated a homeschool liaison, but then required the Title I schools to fund their own through Title I funds, that would indeed be supplanting. So we would not be able to have that scenario.
Okay.
So they would.
Yeah, I
have
was
to be
kind of
funded
confused
out of
with what you
Title
were
I.
saying, if that was still the case.
is.
Because
It is.
I think that's what the issue is. Why would we take away their homeschool liaison? And the answer was because they were funded through Title I.
They are.
I really appreciate this overview because I didn't quite understand all of the Title I rules, and it's been several years since I've been on the board. But it's the district level expenses, 5.5% that you list out on page 2 talks about homeless student services, and I understand that, yes, that's going to cost. It kind of pulls everything together. And mandatory private school set aside. I remember a couple years ago, we were getting some very, very angry emails from the head of a private school who was very offended that we were asking what is their percentage of students below the poverty line, and they were like, why are you asking me this? Why are you doing this? How do we have any private schools in Sarasota that qualify for this?
We do. We serve schools annually, and that Private School Equitable Services Fund is something that we do first when we receive the Title I allocation from the U.S. DOE and the Florida Department of Education. That's actually the first thing that we do is we take a look at the Private School Equitable Services. And to date, we are actually serving 7 private schools with Title I equitable services. So we're serving those eligible students, the parents and families of those students, and the teachers that have participating students in their class. So Title I funds.
So out of the 7.7 million or 7.8 million, some of it is taken away for the 7 private schools. Do we know the dollar amount of that?
Our allocation, we have approximately $123,000 set aside for our private schools.
Okay, thank you.
It's about 1.57% of our total
All right,
allocation.
so the Title I dollars follow the children to their private schools. Thank you.
My pleasure. In addition to the Title I for private schools, we also have other federal sources that support our private schools, including Title II and Title IV dollars as well.
Thank you.
I'm going to Washington next week to talk to some legislators about funding and about future of educational funding. If there's anything that you would ask somebody in the federal government, let me know before I go, because that would be something I'd be happy to at least ask, if possible, get an answer to. But any other questions?
No, but Jane,
Yes, Caroline.
I'd like to thank you for answering me on the weekends. When I send out an email on the weekend, I do not expect you to answer. It's just so that I get it out so that you can handle it on Monday morning. But I appreciate your response. There's 2 of you here. Respond to me. I just wanted you to know that I appreciate it. But it's not necessary.
Thank you so much. This was very, very helpful. Appreciate it. And next we have Dr. Bowden, who will be speaking to us today about FADS, the Superintendent's Association, and Florida Tax Watch.
Sure. And so we've had a conversation about my desire to engage in a zero-based budgeting activity. Now that we have a budget on the books for 1920, it's time believe it or not, to start looking to 2021 and what those structures look like. I had the opportunity last week to speak with leadership at FADS, the Florida Association of District School Superintendents, and see if they would make available to them a financial consultant by the name of Dr. Jim Hamilton. Dr. Hamilton has agreed to come down and work with us, and FADS has agreed to fund that. And so it would be no cost to the district, similar to when we did our HR study. And so when you see Dr. Hamilton around and you wonder who's paying this guy, know that it's FADS and that there is no district expenditure for that. Another group that I would like to engage as part of this process is Florida Tax Watch. Florida Tax Watch is a separate, nonpartisan, independent entity that has great experience examining government budgets. I've had conversation with Florida Tax Watch, not recently, not within the last year, but when I came on as superintendent, about how we might tap into their expertise. They're a little bit different in regards to I cannot enter into a contract with Florida Tax Watch. They will not contract with any government agency. In order for them to remain impartial, they don't want government dollars. And so they've said that if they were to come to Sarasota and work with us, it would have to be funded outside of the district. I have approached Jennifer Vine at the Education Foundation and inquired as to whether they would be willing to fundraise and or fund an expenditure for Florida Tax Watch to engage with us, and they have agreed to do so. I just wanted to make sure that the board was on board with bringing in those two entities before we get too far down the road. Neither one of them are formal items that will come before you. Dr. Hamilton's contract will be with FADS, and Florida Tax Watch's contract will be with the Education Foundation, but they will be working in our district. We'll be providing them financial information, and I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page before we move forward in that regard.
Bridget?
This is very exciting. I know there's no surprise about the zero-based budgeting being something that's a priority, so I'm very pleased to hear this moving forward. How much would the engagement for Florida Tax Watch that the Education Foundation would have to raise? Did they give you any kind of idea?
I do not have a proposal from them. My initial conversation, as I said, is over a year old. It was a bit broader, and it came in at approximately $100,000. I think this will be a scaled-down exercise in that regard. But before I reach out to them and get a proposal, I just wanted to make sure you were all aware. And so with your blessing, we'll be doing that in the coming days.
Jay.
Caroline?
I know I sit to the left of you.
I'm sorry.
Hard there. I want to thank you for doing this, for bringing in outside people to look at this district, and not costing us any funds to do it, too, which is always a plus. But I think this is an exciting opportunity. And that's you, again, thinking outside of the box.
Oh, I think it has wonderful opportunities to give us a new way of looking at those budgets. And I know other schools in other states do this on a regular basis, but we do not do this here. And I know for years I asked about this and was told, no, that won't work here. So I'm really pleased as well. Shirley?
I am pleased, too, to be, that you're looking at another way of doing things. We always think that the superintendent is to be sitting there looking at, education, but, sometimes forget that you are also running a business here, and budgeting is a big part of that. But we know a lot of the budgets that go down to the schools are salary-based and the number of teachers, and there's not much you can do. You have X amount of students, you need X amount of teachers, and there's not a lot you can change there. But I would imagine there will be some places, more places. I know you found several places in the budget where you can, what I call them, hidey holes, that you closed up, and maybe we can find more. And I appreciate you taking the step to respond to this. Thank you.
It's what I call no more embossed Christmas cards. That's always a pet peeve of mine. I don't like getting embossed Christmas cards from schools.
My Christmas cards come from Walmart, and I pay for them myself.
Excellent. Outstanding.
I get mine free.
Eric?
I also want to echo that I'm grateful that you're doing this, and thank you.
That's it?
Just before we leave that item, I just want to recognize our budget office. You know, typically when you bring in outside folks, there's some protectionism. I want you to know that the folks in our budget office are excited about this activity. There are processes there that they inherited and are excited about getting into this exercise. You know, we say there is no direct cost in regards to working with FADS and Florida Tax Watch, but there is an opportunity cost in that there will be a considerable amount of time that comes from our budget office, but all of our cost center heads across the district, when we say let's start with a blank sheet of paper and talk about what the needs of your department are, that's a bit of a different process. And so there is an indirect cost to this activity, but I do believe the payback is worth it.
Anything else? Wonderful. Okay, let's move right on to board meeting committees. If you look at the tabbed document that Kathy provided for us yesterday, we're not sure that we have all the committees listed. Does anybody see any additions or revisions to this list that we have?
The one that you have for 2019 for Charlotte County, it's really me still.
Oh, I put that in thinking it was this next year. So scratch that and put you in.
Yes.
And then they will take over in 2020. They'll take over next June.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I just kind of did that on the fly yesterday. I think we can kind of scratch any given child because we really aren't doing that anymore, so we really could take that off. But looking through here, Community Alliance of Sarasota County, is Susie DeBose still on that committee? I think she might be, but I will check and see. Anyone interested in being on that committee? I think you were on that committee for a while, weren't you, Shirley? And it took up a lot.
It took up a lot of time. Was that the one where you were allocating the dollars?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that just didn't seem right to me that as a school board member, I'd be telling county commissioners how to allocate their dollars and judging theirs. So, you know, if they wanted staff, I thought was better positioned to do that.
I served on there for like 3 or 4 years. I hated it, but I did it.
You get a good idea of what's going on in
Yes,
the community, though.
you do.
How about drug-free schools?
I'm doing that.
What is that? I mean,
That's Susie DeBoe also.
and is that something that's in the district, or is that something in the county or state?
It's in the district.
So it's just our school district doing that.
Correct.
Okay.
And just as a sidebar to that, there was a question recently that somebody in the community posed to me about drug testing at Riverview High School and of students. And I guess there is a club there that is a club that drug tests students in order to become a member of the club. And I guess that's what they're doing. I had heard that we weren't doing that on any of our campuses. And I know there's some principals in middle school who have said, no, we don't want that club or that opportunity on our campus. But I guess at Riverview, they are doing that. So, and what is it starts with a D. What is it called?
DeFi.
DeFi.
I think that's.
They had that in
doing
Northport.
that? Yes.
Well, in Northport, it's not on the campus of Northport High School. It's in the community. It's like their community center where they meet. So we're looking into the requirements, whether membership in the club is dependent upon a drug test, how truly voluntary the testing is. I had it explained to me that if you pass your drug test, you get a T-shirt. And so we're looking into that. But I do want to remind the board, anytime we have a conversation about drug testing, there are a number of programs administered by the board that we do drug test students typically is if there is a third party that requires that. And as an example, if you're going to do a nursing rotation at Sarasota Memorial Hospital, you're going to be drug tested. If you're going to do a ride along as an EMT paramedic, you're going to do drug testing. And so we do drug testing. I had someone misstate that we don't do any drug testing of our students. We do drug test our students, but the criteria that we always use is if required by a third-party entity, such as the county or the hospital. But I don't want to get you too far from your committee conversation.
I don't have a problem with that group that wants to have kids join, and if they want a drug test, why would we oppose that?
Well, the person that asked me didn't understand it was another thought that we were doing it. So that's what we have to be careful of, is that it doesn't look like we are drug testing kids randomly from a school. And that's what the person had thought was the case.
Concerns that we might have, as an example, if the drug test takes place on campus, it is immediately associated with the school.
Yeah.
Drug testing typically comes with a protocol. There are disclosure requirements, non-disclosure requirements. So if a child participating in a club at Riverview High School were to be drug tested and happened to fail that test, then what? They don't get their T-shirt. But what happens then? Are parents notified? Is the school notified? We now are in possession of information potentially that ought to be shared with families. And so the drug test is kind of the initial domino, and there's things that happen after that.
Eric?
I think Ms. Goodwin's brought it up, that people at Sarasota Military Academy, that they like the fact that they have drug tests. I think you've told that story. And because they like it, because they're at parties, they can say, I'm sorry, I can't do that because I go to Sarasota Military Academy and I get drug tested. And I understand what you're saying.
Well, I think they did random drug testing from the very beginning of the school, and it was, considered one of the things that they...
Right. I tell what you said that. But I agree with Ms. Brown. I understand what you're saying, but if there's a way to do it, I know Northport's off, but they give them more than the T-shirts. There's places out in the community that they get like a card, they get discounts and free things participating, and I understand what you're saying, but if there's a way around it, I would hope that we could find a way around it.
Okay, FSBA Legislative Liaison for next year, 2019. Who's going to do that?
I'll keep it.
And would you rather do it? Would you want to do it, Shirley?
I prefer being able to meet with the legislators one-on-one than to be over at the FSBA meeting talking about it.
Well,
so I would gladly let Caroline take that.
Juvenile Justice. How many names this thing are we going to put your name on? Yes, you, right?
Yes, it is.
Health Advisory Committee. Bridget, you were doing that before, but you don't really go to that shack meetings anymore, do you?
Yeah, I'm going to keep mine pretty limited, given my current bandwidth.
I think I went to that a couple of times,
I love going. I went for years. I was a member, I think I started in 2010 with that committee, and that's where I got involved with nursing. Are you listening?
Well, it's interesting, but I don't know that it's needed.
Well, it's not necessarily needed, but at any rate, I'm going to leave it blank.
But do you want to do it?
I'm just going to leave it blank.
No, do you want to do it?
No, I don't have time to do it. I mean, I'd love to do it, but I've got to say no a few times because I've got too busy, too much. Human Services Advisory Committee.
I think
that's the one that's got an asterisk by it that says that it's statutorily required.
I think that's the one
that you were on.
that I was on that takes up so much time.
And Sherry Reynolds,
yes,
would always be our fill-in.
I thought staff was going to do that. That's where I thought we left it
I think
off.
we have to find out about that.
That is the one where you divvy up grants.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Okay, Suncoast Workforce Development Board.
I know you're only listing board members, but I am a member of that.
Oh, excellent. And your name was?
B-O-W.
Smith.
Dr. Bowden.
Bowden or Bowden, it is football.
Well, if Dr. Bowden's on it, we don't need anyone else, do we? Or
No. Tobacco-Free Partnership.
I was on the statewide.
Tobacco-Free Partnership. Who is that?
Eric, are you?
I was on it, and I kind of, when we passed the resolution to make everything drug-free, tobacco-free, I kind of dropped off because I didn't see the benefit to the school district, but I'll start attending
Now we
again.
need vaping.
Vaping, don't even get me started about vaping.
Well, and I know at the beginning of the school year they had something at all of them, and I don't know if the signs are up at all of the schools yet either.
But I'll start trying to attend more.
All right.
Value adjustment. Do you like that, Eric?
It's all right. I just don't. My problem is we meet during tax season, which I don't really care for. But I'm already on it. For you guys already made me on it for another year, so I'll do it for another year.
Well, I thought you had already been designated.
I've already been designated,
Yeah,
so
and that's okay?
that's okay.
Okay. Legislative liaison,
What's that with?
working with our lobbyist.
Well, I can do that. I can
All
do
right.
that one.
All right, why don't you do that, Mrs. Brown? Sarasota County Fair Board.
I don't understand why this is on here. I mean, it's not.
I put it on there because it wasn't on before. Because I think you had put yourself in charge after Frank Kovach
I
left.
didn't want to try.
We had never voted on anyone for that. I don't think it was ever on
We
the
didn't vote
list.
for any of these, but it has nothing to do with the school district. We don't.
It doesn't have to do with the school district?
No, I've been on the United Way board. I'm on the Habitat for Humanity board. I've been on the United Way board. I've been on Workforce board. I've been on SEF. I've been on a lot of boards in my time. I mean, this is just another board that I'm on. I have a long history.
But it has nothing to do with the
I'll do
school
the fair
district.
board. I love them.
If you want it.
I'm on. You have to go through the nominating committee. I mean, I'm on it for 3 years.
I thought, talking to Rory, it had something to do with the school district.
I mean, we have graduations there. I've never brought back a report. I think we have. Do we even have graduations there
I
anymore?
never bring back reports on
I'm
anything.
Yeah.
going to find out about that.
But do we even have
I'll just-
graduations there anymore?
No.
We are next year.
Oh, we are.
They were having
Air conditioning issues.
air conditioners.
But they-
renovations.
But yeah, I went through the nominating committee and I'm on the board. In fact, I have a board meeting tonight. So, I mean, once my term is up,
A long day, right?
yeah, once my term is up at the fair board, if somebody else wants to, in the community wants to take my term up, I don't know, me.
I guess that's, and I'm the Value Adjustment Board, and then I know the Sarasota County Human Services Advisory Committee, which has an asterisk, which basically means statutorily required, I think. And all the rest are additional. The question is, if you're coming in as are you representing Sarasota County Schools in these various positions, or is it you just individually as,
You are representing the schools in most of these that I'm.
Well, so like you're on the hospital board, Ms. Goodwin. I don't see that on here.
That's not part of this. It's just because I live in the community.
so what's
Right,
the,
it's just like the fair
that's-
board.
Yeah, well, okay, we'll see. But Greater Florida Consortium of School Boards,
It has to be. You have to be there.
pardon?
You have to be there because you'll be president. Mm-hmm. And I'll stay with you as.
Anything else? Okay, we'll clean this up and I need to ask questions about the Human Services Advisory and the Community Alliance because I really don't know those answers. We just put this list together as of yesterday, so we'll get back to everyone on this, but this gives us a good place to start.
I have a quick question. And
Yes.
It's kind of, I mean, we can defer it to the comment section, but just because we were talking about drug-free schools, do we offer DARE in our schools anymore? Or do we have a program similar to that through our police force?
We have similar programs, but DARE is a specific program, and no, we do not offer
No.
DARE.
Do not?
Correct.
Okay.
We haven't offered it, I think, 2 or 3 years now.
Okay. I just,
Is it relative to the sheriff's office? Is it?
Yes.
Any law enforcement agency could
Okay.
participate in DARE.
Got it.
Through PDs as well as sheriff's
Okay,
office.
got it. Anything else about this item? Next, we're talking about litigation notification, and Mr. Hardy. Who's very happy about today and will be happier tomorrow when he's on a plane for Europe.
That is correct. I saw the agenda and my name was next to this, so I'm here to receive information or answer questions, but I did not place this here, so.
Well, I would just say, we're getting more and more questions now from defendants, respondents, whatever, plaintiffs in some litigation issues. I fear answering these emails or what have you directly with a litigant, and I think that I'd like you to go over again what you think we should do. My issue has always been, if it's in litigation, it's forwarded to you and you handle it. I don't get involved in the weeds. I don't get involved in looking at the records or looking at the transcripts from a case or anything else. I am not a lawyer.
Well, my preference would be for you all not to communicate directly with parties or lawyers who are in litigation or threaten litigation against the board. As far as getting you information about litigation, I'm happy to provide you with whatever information you would like. If that, frankly, historically, that hasn't been very much. If you would like a periodic report, these are the cases that are in litigation, quarterly, let's say, or I'm happy to do that. Obviously, everything's a public record, so I'm not going to give you necessarily mental impressions, but just status. And then if people want individually to have conversations, none of you are shy about picking up the phone and calling me, and you shouldn't be. Or if cases are in litigation, we can have litigation meetings if that's desired by the board. I'm usually the one who asks for those to get authority for settlement around mediation times and such things, but I'm happy to give you as much or as little as you want. I also don't want to, overwhelm, and because the more I do, obviously it's time and therefore money, so I try to be cognizant of that too. But if you all would like kind of a quarterly report of here are the cases in litigation to give you an idea of what's out there, I'm happy to do that.
Caroline?
Well, for instance, one day last week or the week before, I received 10 volumes of so-called emails with the whole litigation. And I called you on that, and I said, my God, what do I have to do with this? I don't want to read 10 volumes of blow-by-blow from a trial. I don't want to be a lawyer, so...
Well, whenever
that's what I pay you to do.
I appreciate that. Whenever I give anything to any of you, I give it to all of you. And so that's, and as we discussed, there was no obligation for you to, or need for you to read that. But I don't want one of you to have something and the others not to have it. So
why, I guess I have to ask you, Bridget, why would we even want to look at all of that information? Because I know you're the one that requested it.
A couple things. There's, I think it's informative. There's information in general, getting sense, but I overall believe as board members there may or may not be valuable information in there. So it's to his point of if you choose to read through it, by all means. If not, that's up to you. So,
but then that makes it a public record once it goes into email.
The rule. Well, it will eventually be a public record, regardless. But the
things either are or aren't public records. Mm-hmm. Things that are filed in court files are public records, whether you see them or get them or not, if they're in public court files. If I'm giving you some specific student record information, potentially that would not be a public record because it would be separate and apart from litigation. It's educational records that more than likely are exempt. I mean, it depends on what it is.
Wasn't this one regarding a student?
So again, kind of going by what Mrs. Brown started, or Mrs. Brown, I'm looking at you, Mrs. Goodwin, is being aware of when to talk about things publicly and when not to. I know we've talked about this in the past, to get a quarterly report, to have some kind of pulse. A lot of them are maybe liability, tort, what have you, but I think it allows us to have a better sense, and you don't want it to be so redundant where we're expending more money for updates. And then should we have additional questions about specific cases? I believe that's within our discretion.
I agree. That's a really good way to handle it. I was just shocked to find 10 volumes come through.
Exactly.
And it exactly said volume on the email.
Shirley?
I agree that I think a quarterly update, brief update, might be good. Regarding, I think it was 11 volumes, I don't feel comfortable, filling up my space on my computer or my phone with all that. Since that's not the only copy of that record, can I delete all of them?
You can.
All right.
Can. We've got all of that.
Eric?
So if I could just paint a scene for a second. So when the education commissioner came and spoke, there was a lot of Oak Park parents who came in to sit, and there was a medically fragile child in the back in a wheelchair, and didn't look like he was very communicative. That the nonverbal person, and then the mother got up and spoke, and rather long question of the education commissioner, and I think she alluded that she had a complaint or a lawsuit, or I'm not exactly sure. She was not from Sarasota. But at the time, I didn't know where she was from. She was in Sarasota. Oak Park parents are there. And so I'm thinking, I'm sitting with the education commissioner, and he comes down and asks me about it, and I didn't know anything about it. But it would be nice to have a quarterly report so you would know. But, you saw Oak Park parents, you saw given everything that had happened, you saw a child, saw her get up, say her thing. It's in Sarasota. Nowhere in my thought process did I realize that the lady was really from Seminole County, and she was talking about something in Seminole County. So it would be nice to have that information, because, maybe it did happen. Somebody sued something in Oak Park, and I just wasn't aware of it. So it was a very surreal time, especially given everything that she was talking about and saying. It would be when you're. It was very.
I'm happy to provide you a quarterly report, which I will work on upon my return.
Please don't work on it until you get back.
Not to worry. But it'll be the cases that are in litigation, and the great bulk of those, and there aren't a huge number of those at any time. I don't want to make this sound like you're going to be getting, volumes of paper. There's a relatively small number given the size and scope of this district, and most of them are fairly what I'll call routine things like auto accidents, bus accidents, those kinds of things.
In Sunday's paper, there was an article about 2 cases against employees. You weren't involved in those, were you?
Those were both criminal cases, so no, I was not involved, and the school district was not involved.
But, I'd like to be made aware of those, too, cases against our employees.
I don't always know about those.
So perhaps somebody can give us an update of any lawsuits against our employees, too.
Lawsuits or criminal
lawsuits,
yep.
or
Legal proceedings.
Legal proceedings, yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
I would think that would be, frankly, I don't know that I would even know that necessarily. HR presumably would.
I was going to say our
would know that.
HR may be able to give us some information, but I'm just
to a certain threshold. There's
Yeah.
a disclosure threshold, and
Yes.
so if someone's got a traffic ticket that doesn't come to our attention, but if it's drug related, child related, there is a disclosure standard, and certainly we could compile those incidents that have been disclosed to us. We'll probably put a footnote on it saying that it may or may not be a complete list, but it's.
Well, I would think at least those that might have an impact on their employability.
Certainly.
Well, I will do this when I return. I will, in the month of October, before the end of the month of October, I will get you a report. I'll make up a format that I think is reasonable, and then you all can give me feedback if you want more or less or something different. Is that fair?
that's fair.
If you make sure you include Al and Lynn in that process, they're probably the ones that touch it most frequently within our organization.
Okay. Now let me make clear, especially when you bring up Lynn. I'm pretty comfortable. I know about all the lawsuits. At least I hope so, even if I'm not the one directly dealing with them. But certainly, in typical tort suits, accidents, negligence, those kinds of claims, people have to give us notice. Any government has to be given 6 months notice before they can file suit. I occasionally find out about those, but those are almost always being dealt with in risk management. So my report to you will include
Should be what you
will
are
include
involved
litigation.
with. We can't expect you to
not
be
claims.
Out gathering information from everybody. I think what you're involved in would be a wonderful thing. And we'll go from there. But I will say this to all of you, please be careful in what you say in an email, day or night. Do not be talking to individuals that are called, because it seems lately that we have a lot of people reaching out to us who are saying, well, I'm involved in a suit, and did you know about this, and did you find out about that? And a lot of times, no, I didn't know about it, and I didn't find out about it, and it isn't appropriate for me to comment on it, anyway. So just be very careful about that.
I will get you something in October.
Thank you so much. And publicly, have a great time. I wish I was going with you.
Thank you.
And why don't you stay right there, and we'll talk about our audit policy.
After I'm not sure how long ago it's been, but sometime this summer, I was with you when we went through the Osceola audit. What theirs is called is Audit Advisory Committee. You all worked through that and gave me edits, and I have tried to capture them all in what I have given you, which is now entitled Auditor Selection Committee. I think you all have a copy of that. This is obviously based on the Osceola policy with the changes that were discussed at the last workshop. So if there are further changes, let me know, and we can make them. But otherwise, I think in the absence of any additional changes, I think it's ready to be advertised.
Any changes? Does anyone have any questions or concerns or statements or changes? These were the ones that we looked at making before.
Yeah, just make sure I got everything. I tried to,
Yep.
but I could have missed
We still
something.
don't have a financial advisory committee policy. Don't know if we need one or not. Probably could be a good time to discuss it. Maybe this Thursday there's a meeting, I understand, so perhaps. And another question that I had was, should one of our financial advisory committee members, such as John, who's the chair, be on the audit committee or be invited to be on the audit committee?
I think that would be a good idea because with continuity.
Oh, it's something to think about. Eric?
I agree on the surface. It sounds like a good idea. It just is the skill set that we rely upon for the Financial Advisory Committee is a separate skill set than we rely on for the Audit Committee. I agree. John Craner would be one of those unique individuals who would overlap skill set. But for the most part, we have people who seems like it's heavily weighted towards, at least right now, a lot of finance people.
Advisory.
We have, I'm going to say his name wrong. I don't know how to say it right. Robinson, but it's not Robinson, but it's pretty close to my name.
Robeson. He's gone. He's moved.
No, it's Robinson without an N, right?
Yes.
It's Robeson.
Robertson is E-R-S-O-N.
Robeson, I think is the way.
Okay.
He's gone to Hawaii.
Okay.
He's moved away.
But then we had him and the vice chair, who's heavily weighted towards governance of school districts. But I'm just saying it's really a different skill set. But I agree that Mr. Craner clearly has overlapping skill set. But as a general rule, the skill set which this board has historically looked in a financial advisory committee is a different skill set than we look for an audit committee.
Correct.
This, as this is set up now, the committee has 7 members, one of whom is the board chair or another board member, one of whom is a CPA, and then the other 5 are community members at large, which each of you are responsible for picking one. So certainly one or more of you could pick people on the Financial Advisory Committee if you so chose.
Bridget?
So moving to item section E about the CPA member shall be a Florida licensed certified public accountant in good standing and must either reside in or practice accountancy in Sarasota County. Fine with that. The nomination of the CPA member may be made by any school board member, the chief financial officer of the school district, or the superintendent of schools. If more than one qualified CPA member is nominated to serve on the committee, then the school board, by majority vote of quorum present, shall decide the CPA member who shall serve. Is that from Osceola? I don't remember that part.
I think, but I don't have that.
I have the Osceola Yes.
It
I
is?
think it is.
I just, and if you, to be reminded, and this is not to discount you or any, or even the CFO position, there's been a change in statute kind of really strengthening the autonomy of the audit committee. I know that they could bring forward a nomination, I just,
Right. No,
That was
that is
done
out of
long before.
Osceola.
that's right. So that's why I didn't know if that was an Osceola.
That was the one caveat, that E, that I was wondering if we needed to strike.
I mean, I would strike that because we just bring forward, we can have 5, and then we need to identify a CPA. We can have more than one CPA on there.
Yep.
But if we're of our nominations, if we're absent a CPA, we need to seek out a CPA.
Yep.
I'm sure we'd be okay if the CFO or the superintendent had some recommendations, but it should be brought forward. I think again for the in the element of independence and autonomy, I would keep
Sounds
it.
good.
I would strike that.
So you want just E out?
Yes.
The whole thing? No, I just.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Well,
Means the superintendent or
The nomination of the CPA member.
Okay.
I don't think we need the nomination of the CPA member.
So we just want the first sentence.
Yeah.
just
of
the
E.
first sentence.
And then then it strikes down to. Oh, sorry, I don't have a number.
And then
here.
sometimes you get too prescriptive in this, and then you have to change the policy every year.
Well, so we have the CPA member shall serve. I mean, we can't force them a term of in office of 4 years.
Well, somebody can always resign, but the point is there, if they want to continue serving once
Okay,
they're
so
appointed,
we
they
keep
have
that.
4 years.
Okay.
Well, don't you just want to strike the language that says
It's just about
by the
nomination.
chief financial officer or the
School board.
superintendent? Because the nomination of the CPA may be made by any school board member.
Yep.
Period.
Period. All right.
Okay, that works.
So just the rest of that sentence is out.
Okay.
And we're continuing with, if more than one qualified CPA is nominated, the school board decides. So we're just taking out the chief financial officer of the school district or the superintendent of schools.
Yeah, because I think we need to have a designated spot. Like if we had more than one CPA, but this one's going to be the designated.
Okay. We'll just take out
CPA.
those two phrases.
Can there be a way that, when we do this, that we advertise? I know Sarasota County advertises for open positions and how people can apply. I'm not out here knowing all these people.
No,
I would like people to apply, people who want to do this, because and I'm thinking they're not going to be lining up at the door either. So I think we need help getting people who were interested in coming to be there, because I don't have a list of people coming to me wanting to be on this
I do.
already.
I do.
I do. I already have talked about it in the community enough that I've had people saying, "Oh, I would be happy to volunteer to be selected if possible." So,
Well, I would just like to be able to advertise it somewhere.
I don't have a problem if Ms. Brown wants to advertise it. I don't have a problem.
We could get more people we don't know about.
If you do that, then I would suggest you're going to have an application
I know.
form,
It gets very-
screening somehow.
yeah, I don't.
How about we just say
Something,
that
I
they email Shirley Brown? If someone's interested in applying, they can email Shirley Brown. And Shirley's, there's no application. Shirley can vet them however she wants. Shirley's allowed to have whoever she wants to pick.
I think
We can simply do a media statement
say make
that
a-
says
okay.
we're looking for members.
enough.
If you're interested, you may contact any or all school board members.
That's fine.
Or send
I think that's
resume
fine.
over to.
But I don't think that
School
needs
board
to be
member.
contained in policy, do you?
No.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Anything else other than the part in E that's coming out?
Not that I see. Anyone
All right.
else?
No.
I think it looks good.
All right. I will get you a revised policy that can be advertised.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And just, Madam Chair, I know we're done with this. Before you end, I'm not sure what else there is on the agenda. I just want to make sure we notice that we're going to go into a litigation meeting. So if I can
Yes, we are. At
say
2.
that when you're ready for that.
Yes.
Ask me to pick up your reading and walk. Is that good for you to be doing that?
Are we allowed to roll right into that, or since we noticed it at 2, do we have to do that at 2 o'clock?
Well, we certainly can't do it until the court reporter and everyone is present.
We must do it at
Break
2.
and regather at 2. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll just say it now. At the end of whenever you're done with this workshop, I would request that the board recess the workshop so that we can go into a litigation meeting to discuss the case of Jimenez Ruiz versus the school board. Present in the meeting will be the 5 members of the school board, myself, the superintendent, and Richard McCrae, who is the board's lawyer in that case, and a court reporter, so that we can get the board's advice and direction with regard to the litigation. When that's over, we will come back and you can formally adjourn the workshop. And then shortly thereafter, at 3, I know you have the regular board meeting.
Wonderful, thank you. Eric?
I was waiting for member comments.
Pardon?
I was jumping ahead to member comments, sorry.
Just jumping ahead, right? Okay, any comments? Eric?
Yes, I have 2. My first one is, we talked about the CIP plan a couple months ago, and CIP plan, the capital improvement plan, or the 5-year plan.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I wasn't very supportive of it, but it ended up on the consent agenda, and so I ended up having to ask it to be moved off the consent agenda because I think I made myself pretty clear about how I wasn't supportive of it. I don't need to get into why, but it ended up on the consent agenda, which I thought, maybe it was just an oversight because clearly I wasn't something I was supporting. And then it was the last meeting, the meeting before, we talked about the health insurance rates. And again, for whatever I'm allowed to have my own reasons, I didn't support the raise for whatever reason. But then it ended up on the consent agenda again, something that I didn't want to support. And I thought consent agenda was placed there for things that were normal, rudimentary, that were going to be, unanimous. But if something's in the workshop and if even one board member clearly doesn't support it, I think that those things should be on new businesses. And so when I sent an email into Kathy asking to pull it to new business, I was told that I can't pull it to new business now. So then I'm in the position of, now if I'm not allowed to pull things out of new business, then I'm in the position of voting against things that I support, or do I vote for things that I don't support? I just don't think that that's right. That if clearly if there's an agenda item that's not going to receive unanimous approval, and you workshop it, and it's clear that at least one board member doesn't support it, that it should be on new business, not on the consent agenda.
Okay, I hear that. And when did you request it be moved to new business?
I think I requested it yesterday.
And what is the deadline on moving things to new business?
That's funny you should ask that. So if you go back a couple more months ago, I requested 3 weeks in advance to move something off of new business onto new business. And I was told at that time that the 7-day thing didn't apply to me, that I had to have a reason. You said multiple times in that tape, Ms. Goodwin, what is your reason, Mr. Robinson? What is your reason? You have to have a reason. The time limit isn't. It's on tape, Ms. Goodwin. You said it multiple times. You have to have a reason. So now I'm telling you my reason. My reason is I don't support the increase of the health insurance. So if it creates a really weird position, because then people could start really playing games with the consent agenda. If there's 2 items that one that I really support and one that I'm really against, and you put them both in the consent agenda to try to trick somebody up, I don't think that that's anybody's purpose, and I don't think that that's good governance. If any member wants to pull something from the consent agenda, they should be able to pull it.
Jane?
Well, I agree with you that they should be able to pull it, but they should be able to pull it to the deadline the Friday before. We have a rule that the agenda is posted a week previous to the last Friday's agenda deadline, and that if you find something in that time, we will move it. We've said this numerous times, and it comes back. Mrs. Ziegler has had things at the last minute to move. You've had things at the last minute to move, but no one else has had things to move. And it's interesting to me that nobody can look at this. I always was told that you could move something in that week prior, but that it was a hard date.
Then why did you put it on the consent
Friday
agenda, Ms.
before.
Goodwin? Why did you put something that you knew that I didn't support on the consent
I
agenda?
didn't think about how you did or did not approve
So
of
then,
it, Eric.
so now I'll take you at your word that it was an error.
You would have looked at it before Friday, in if there was something you needed to change or move, then you would have moved it, and it would not have been a problem. And you should have addressed this with the superintendent or with me, and not with Miss Kathy Tompkins.
Ms. Goodwin, I'll take you at your word that you did it in error.
Yes.
Then you should correct your error.
I think we need to correct for the record that the superintendent is responsible for the creation of the agenda.
But-
We do an agenda review, at which point the chair may move things from new business, from the consent item to new business, but I'm responsible for preparing the agenda. Typically, everything goes as it's submitted from departments. It gets onto the consent agenda, and then as we discuss it, those items make their way to new business. But I just want to go on record that the chair has the ability to move it during agenda review, and I have not denied any board member the ability to move an item from the consent agenda to new business if done by the deadline.
I was told I had to send it to Kathy, so then why did you put it on the consent agenda then?
I think I just gave you the answer. Everything starts on the consent agenda. If we believe that it needs to move to new business, we move it. And so you have the ability to move any item you want.
So if you knew that there was something I didn't support, you would put it on the consent agenda, even if you knew board members didn't support it?
That I knew you didn't support.
I said at the workshop, I was pretty crystal clear in the workshop.
You asked us about what we.
Caroline is next, and then
Thank you.
Bridget, and then Shirley.
One of the things that's been lost on this board is the fact is that one person might disagree and not be in support of something, but when it comes to a vote and the board votes as a whole, then that agenda item is moved forward and the board is in support of it. So whether you like it or not and you don't agree with it, it doesn't matter because the board as a whole has voted in favor of it. And I think that's lost on this board. That has been my entire school board.
So you're saying that I should vote for something I don't support?
Well, I have an interesting point to make. But
So you're saying I should vote for something if I don't support it?
Well, let's go through the
Okay.
member.
What Shirley said at last meeting that we had is that she's tired of explaining policy and procedures because it's not adhered to and not listened to, and you don't want to understand it. And that's exactly what I'm finding.
Shirley?
Thank you. So what you just indicated was once the board votes on something, it's ratified unless it's amended in the future time, and that is for us to move forward to and to live in. That is policy.
Yes.
Have we ever adopted our board policies?
Yes, we
Or
have. It's in
procedures?
procedure.
No, we haven't.
Procedures, what didn't get
We've
adopted
never-
was your change.
No, we actually never voted on them. That's one. Two, the second part is I think it's bad governance in general. I know the Friday has been a long-standing existence, and the argument in my mind is what I have heard been said is because it's advertised and it's what it's out there in the public. Well, the content is the same. It's just the location of it being moved. So the public notice is not hijacked by saying this is on consent, board member A pulls it to new business so that they can pull it off to vote it up or down or whatever it is. I agree that there is certain structural governance that should be abided by, but what it seems, and I don't think it's an unreasonable statement, if you could do it before Friday, that's optimal. If something were to come up that would change, I mean, there are things that information could come up that would change your vote for whatever reason, and then you're saying, no, too bad, it's that 7 o'clock on Friday or whatever it is, you still have to vote for it. That doesn't make any sense. So to me, we are picking and choosing when you want it, but I think it's just, at the end of the day, the basic governance structure. If a board member wants to pull something off, you vote for it how you like, they vote for it how they like, but to force and keep things and say, no, we cannot move things from consent after X date on Friday is, unnecessary. It causes more problems, I think, than it should. We argue more about not moving something and versus, fine, let them move it, you vote your piece, and be done with it. I think there's more of the resistance to move it causes more of a rift than just moving the item.
See, to me, it means that homework hasn't been done ahead of time. I make sure that I am through my agenda by Friday. I'm through it way before then, but I make sure so that there's something on there, I can pull it in time because I listened to what our policy and procedures are. This is how I've worked for all of these years, and whether you like it or not, that's how I think it should be handled. And right now, the majority of the board feels that way. So as long as the majority of the board feels that way, that's how it'll be.
Are you finished?
Yes.
Are you finished? Hold on a minute. Are you finished, Bridget?
There were procedures in place before I got on the board. Those procedures were in place before either of you got on the board. These procedures are there. I know at one point you tried to change something in them having to do with, I don't know what it was, finances or something. But the procedures regarding the agenda have not changed. In fact, Kathy, would you please print them out and have them available for all of us at the board meeting this afternoon? And those procedures say that here's the agenda, and when you get the agenda, right, it says if you have any questions, contact this person. And the reason you do that is so that we don't come to a board meeting and look stupid because we didn't do our homework and didn't have an answer, or we try to play gotcha with a staff member, or require a bunch of staff members to sit during every board meeting to answer questions that may pop up from a board member who didn't do their homework and ask the questions beforehand. Perhaps if you look at something, you make that question. Maybe there is a good reason for your objection to that item, something you saw that came up that we didn't know about. And guess what? We might want to pull that item off the agenda. That's one of the reasons why we as board members should be looking at that agenda before it is out there and posted. But when the procedure has always been, it gets locked in stone on Friday, and that's what it is. When we were discussing this item that you now want, because you talk about hijacking, I mean, it's like it seems that every board meeting is being hijacked by something picayune that's being pulled out. And again, it just kind of shows that someone didn't do their homework. There was an issue regarding the YMCA and why are we making this agreement with them? Well, it was to pay somebody for what they had done before, and it was reimbursements from Hurricane Irma. I would think, you would rather have that answered privately rather than publicly, that, you didn't do your homework. Regarding this instance, you say you objected to the insurance rate increase. Well, the insurance rate increase is the insurance rate increase. As a board member, you can't say, we're not going to accept that. It is what it is. I think your question, or what your concern was that should we increase the salaries at the same time if we're increasing the insurance rates? I don't know how those two have exactly counterparts, because we pay the employees' portion of the insurance. They don't pay anything, so why would we reimburse them for what we're paying? It's what we're paying. If anything, if you want to keep things on an even level, you would reduce the amount that we're paying them to cover our increased cost. So to me, there is nothing wrong with pulling something for comment. If you want to say, I think we should increase teachers' salaries if we have to increase the insurance rates, you can say that. You can talk. There's nobody going to stop you from talking about it. But it is what it is. That's what the insurance rates are going to be. You can vote against them all you want, but that's what the insurance rates are going to be.
No, I can't vote against. That's the issue.
Well, it wouldn't change things because the insurance rates are what the insurance rates are. So I don't know what you think. I mean, you can voice your concern over it, but if you wanted to pull the item, the procedures say, and we've gone over this time and time again, the procedures are before Friday, talk to the chair or the superintendent and have it pulled to new business. And it happens. To be springing this on week after week at the last minute, the day before or 2 days before the meeting, it's just got to stop. It has got to stop. It's like, follow the procedures. That's all there is, because it's not fair to us, the rest of the board, and it's not fair to staff, because if you've got a question that you don't understand something, find out from the staff, because we've done our homework, and if you don't understand it, you're the one who needs to go back to staff and answer the questions. That's why you get the agenda ahead of time.
Eric?
And this is part of the root. You guys are telling me why I'm doing stuff or why I feel this way or I haven't done my homework, I have not done my homework. I don't. The fact that I support something or don't support something, I can have whatever reason I want. We're all separately elected officials. You can have whatever reason you want, Ms. Brown.
Then just pull it before Friday. That's all you have to do. Follow procedure.
Ms. Brown, you're allowed to pull. You're allowed to vote however you want. And as far as Ms. Zucker's, that she's always done this. Last fall, you added on the Greater Florida Consortium of School Board onto new business on the agenda after the deadline. Did I say anything when you did that? No, I did not. Why? Because if you wanted to put it on there, I was fine with it. There's a rule that applies. The rule should apply to everybody. Yes, you did. You added it onto new business. But
if I did that, excuse me.
You did do that.
If I did that, then I asked for a placeholder.
No.
I asked for a placeholder, because if I know I'm going to the consortium and we're going to have...
The agenda was published, then it was changed. But
it was changed before last Friday's deadline, Eric.
Okay. But it seems like you guys are able to play political games here by putting things on the agenda that you know that people don't want to support on the consent agenda.
No.
And that is just plain...
That could not be further from the truth.
You're playing political games.
No, we're not.
With it.
Political games.
No, I said I didn't support something, and you're forcing me. You're stifling the debate just like you stifle the public comments of people.
We have never stifled anyone's comments.
Well, you're stifling me right now.
Them.
I'm talking. I have the floor. Madam Chair, I have the floor. If somebody comes open to the public today and says something that changes a particular board member's view on a particular agenda item, then at that point, you should be able to pull it. People have the ability to come up to open to the public and speak. And if they come to you with information that sways you, that changes your decision, because basically what you're saying is, if you come to open to the public and you want to speak on anything on the consent agenda, you're wasting your time because we're not going to pull it. And that's wrong. The people should be able to come to open to the public and speak, and they should be able to say what is on their mind. And if they want to voice that they don't support something, and if enough people come, or if people make a cogent argument and it sways a board member, I think at that point in time you should be able to pull it off. To say discount, no, people open to the public, you can't do that. Or something could happen over the weekend. You could get additional information over the weekend. A news story may come out that makes you change your mind. I get it. I don't see what the issue is. It's going to pass anyways. You guys are spending, like Ms. Sigler said, you're spending more time. Go to new business, let it pass 4-1 and move on. I don't see what the issue is. It's this gotcha game where you guys put things on that you know I don't support, and you put things that I do support just to play gotcha games and play politics with the consent agenda. And I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. I don't, Ms. Brown, I'm always going to come up and say that I think playing politics with the consent agenda is wrong. And I don't think that's right.
I have never played politics.
Well, you are now.
Oh, no, I'm not. You are.
No.
And we can argue. We look like idiots out in the park, and Bridget can sit there with her arms crossed and laugh, and that's fine. It is what it is.
What do you have to lose by doing this?
What do you have to lose by not following procedure?
You're forcing me to vote on something I don't approve.
No, we did not force you. You did not pull it in a timely manner.
Why was it on the consent agenda to begin with, Ms. Brown? That's the foundation. Why was it on the consent agenda to begin with? To play gotcha games.
Board members.
No, I don't know. You always want to be the victim here.
I'm not being the victim. I'm stating a fact.
You will get a copy of the procedures. You will see the procedures. The procedures say this is when you vote. I don't think when you made your comments during that workshop, when they talked about the insurance increases, that you were concerned about the cost of the insurance increases as much as you were saying how we ought to reimburse the teachers for the increase.
I can speak for myself, Ms. Brown.
Well, you can change what you want, and I know that sometimes what you say isn't actually based on fact. I mean,
It shouldn't be only if you agree with me that it gets moved to consent agenda.
if you do it in time,
But I did something 3 weeks in advance and it was denied. 3 weeks, I asked.
I don't know how you could possibly have done it 3
But I
weeks in
did.
advance. We don't get the agenda 3 weeks in advance.
But I did ask for minutes to be pulled 3 weeks in advance. The bottom line
asked
question
about
is,
the minutes,
the bottom line question is, why was it on the
months
consent agenda
ago.
to begin with? Why? The simple answer is because you want to play a gotcha game. Why else was it on the consent agenda when you knew I didn't support it?
We don't handle the consent agenda. Kathy puts the consent agenda.
No, the superintendent puts the consent agenda together.
No, it's based on what
Departments, the
happened.
superintendent does, and Kathy does the mechanics of it.
Yes.
And then we have agenda review on Thursday. We move things around. Do I need to go at that meeting and say, let's see, is there anything in here that Eric had
Anything that's
interest
controversial.
in?
You should say anything
Let
that's
me move.
controversial.
I don't want to move everything to new agenda that doesn't belong there and have a 6-hour meeting, Eric. I'm not interested in doing that. That's one of the things I do not want to do or have people have to sit through. We look at efficiencies, then you have from that Friday when it's published to the following Friday, which is the drop dead date to make any changes, move things in or out of whatever you feel is necessary, provided you're discussing it with the superintendent or with both of us. Bridget?
I think that Eric made a really good point, though, is so, again, the whole purpose of our role in general is to cast a vote in support or not of a number of different items. Consent agenda and all governance structures and boards is a efficient way to get a lot of germane business off, and then certain items move to new business for debate, or in the event it's not a unanimous decision. So there is a mechanism, it's called Robert's Rules of Order, which I'm sure you all are very familiar with, that there are abilities to pull things and move them and close debate and all these other things. But so I think, so this, again, I think the resistance is more intended, it's more personal, and sure, it could be frustrating that the minutes, what have you. I did not intend for this to be an ongoing issue. I believed in what I felt. I thought that there should be a reasonable ability to pull something because it's an actual agenda item. Move forward. I think I think we're getting caught up on those elements. But what is the purpose? Remember, we were talking about changing public comment. What is the purpose of public comment then? If we were going to, like we talked about before, restructuring it so public comment could speak to the items of the agenda, if you were unable to move something, if someone came forward with some information, I don't know, it could be a million different things. And all of us should be able to say, whoa, I didn't know that, or that changes my vote. I'd like to pull item X to new business so I can cast my vote accordingly. That is just a reasonable functional aspect. So, but if you cut it off on Friday and it's absolute, just think about it from the public comment standpoint. What is their role? I mean, if a member of the public wants to come and speak on something we're supposed to take action on, but we can't do anything about it except vote down everything, which I think is a little unreasonable, what is your comment to that?
Well, I think that it's a great question, but it usually has nothing to do with public comment. What it has to do with doing our due diligence.
No, but
I'm
I'm asking specific to the public comment.
It has nothing to do. I've never seen a time that.
But it could, right? I mean, it could happen. It could happen technically, right?
Never had it.
It doesn't mean it can't. It could
It's 21
happen.
years, Bridget, and I've never had that.
Shirley.
I was trying to make a point.
I would think that perhaps public comment might have some comments on something that might be on new business. But let's, for instance, discuss what exactly is your objection to the insurance rate increase. You have some evidence. You have some evidence that they are doing it wrong, that you can do it at a better price. I mean, what exactly is your opposition to the rate increase that we are told we are being charged for the insurance. I mean, basically, we're not being charged. We're self-insured. It's the amount that we're budgeting. Why would you want to vote against that? What is it in that information that we're getting that you think is incorrect or that you object to, that you need to vote no for it? I mean, it is what it is. So why do you want to vote no?
Here's a problem with your question. It's a valid question, and that's why we workshop it. Here's the problem with that question, because I'm afraid that what you're basically insinuating is I can only pull something if 3 people agree with me. And I think that's a dangerous road to take down. I think that the fact that you guys put things on the consent agenda...
I'm not asking procedure. I'm asking, why do you want to pull that? I don't understand. You can pull something for comment, no problem. But what is it that you feel that will be accomplished by you voting no? Can you find a reason?
Yes, I have a reason.
Excuse me.
I thought you asked me a question.
I haven't finished asking the question. You've already got your answer before you even know what my question is. That's been the problem. My question is, what do you think your issue is on why we shouldn't increase the rate that we're setting aside for our insurance? What information do you have that shows that information is incorrect? Where did you get this information? And please share it with us. If you know there's a reason that information is incorrect, that rate increase shouldn't be, share it with us. Share it with us now. I mean, if it's just so that you can spout off at the meeting, you can do that anyway. You can pull it for comment. But if there's a good reason why we should be voting no on that, share it with me. I want to know. That's my answer. That's my question. Sure.
Sure. So I'm going to answer your question. Personally, I'm have my concerns about answering your questions because I'm afraid it creates a precedent that if somebody wants to pull an item for agenda, it shouldn't have to be that I have to convince a majority of the board. Any one board member should be able to pull something from an agenda.
Wait.
No, go ahead. No, if you want something to say.
I'm changing. No, by Friday, you can.
Okay. It's fine. Anything else?
No, I'm just changing my position in my seat for my knees.
Okay.
Nothing to do with you.
No problem. So if I get additional information, I should be able to pull later. But I had already said my views on the issue. So the bottom line question, the foundation is, why was it put on the consent agenda to begin with? When clearly, and the argument shouldn't be, we're going to put on the consent agenda as long as 3 members support it. Okay, I don't agree in that concept. If 3 board members support it, if 3 board members vote for it after the budget, after it votes at the meeting, then that's a separate issue. But if you put forward agenda items that you know that I don't support, and you put them in the consent agenda, that's playing gotcha games. That's forcing people to vote differently than you know that they want to vote. And I don't see how that helps the board at all. I don't see how that... Yes, I'm sorry, you raised your hand. Did you want to say something?
I'm scratching.
Oh, okay, I saw you do this with your finger. Okay, no problem. So I think that if any board member... And think about it if I know you guys are in the majority, but think about it if one day if you're not in the majority and an agenda item comes up that you don't support, that that you core don't believe in, and they decide to put it on the consent agenda, and they put it on the consent agenda in such a way that they add it with something else. So they do what Ms. Zucker did, where they put it on after the Friday. It's just not right. I mean, everybody should be able to vote. We're spending more time. You're talking about a 6-hour-long meeting. It takes literally 30 seconds. You pull it from the agenda. We all in favor say aye, nay, boom, we move on. It takes literally nanoseconds to do. There's no reason not to do it, and there was no reason to put it on the consent agenda. This is the second time in a row for 2 issues that you knew I didn't support that were put on the consent agenda, and I don't understand why they're put on the consent agenda. Yes, yes, Miss Goodwin, you should look down, and if you see something's controversial, if you see something that's not going to receive a 5-0 vote, those kind of things should not be on the consent agenda. Consent agenda items should be rudimentary, normal, customary things that you just need to get out of the way. We don't need to have a separate vote to allow Venice High to go to a volleyball tournament in Atlanta. That's the kind of stuff that you put on the consent agenda. But if you know that there's a particular item that a particular board member doesn't support, I don't know what is served by doing that. And there may be the agenda item that Ms. Ziegler wanted to pull was based upon a newspaper article by Mr. McKinnon that came in over the weekend. And so she read a newspaper article over the weekend and she wanted to pull it. Things like that occur. Sometimes I sit there and think, I was like, okay, is this worth, voting against? Should I? So these things go in ahead of my mind. I think about them, but I truth be known, I talked to some people in the school district yesterday that gave me pause and made me think about it. And made me think that, yeah, maybe I do want to pull this and vote the way I do. So you're asking me why I guess your question is why I don't want to vote for it? Because there are some custodians down in Venice who work for nothing else but their benefits. They essentially take no money home. Her husband's a long-haul trucker, and she's a custodian. She lives in Northport. I'm not going to say her name, and she works in Venice. And her entire paycheck goes to, she has the family plan. The husband, long-haul trucker, he doesn't have health insurance. And she has to, work nights, sleeps during the day. He's not there half the time. And, she's not going to get a pay raise. She's one of those people that when you do the 12-hour raise, she gets a pay raise. And I had a chance to interact with her because they were doing the Silver Glove Award and talk to her about this issue. And it moved me. It gave me great concern. And so prior to that, I was probably willing to, just let it go, not say anything. But after talking to her, I just felt I was moved by her talking about her financial situation and the fact that she doesn't bring home her paycheck. Her entire paycheck goes to health insurance. And so I understand it's only 1.8%, but, for me, it's symbolism. So, I mean, other people have their, and you have a valid reason to vote your way, Ms. Brown. I don't have a problem with that. I respect your right to have those views. But yeah, I talked to her and, and I've had a relationship. I worked as a custodian underneath her twice. She's a pretty hard lady, tough lady. She would never talk about, her life, but I know that she has a tough life. And her husband's never home because he's out trying to earn money, driving between California, long-haul trucker. She sees him a couple days a week, and during that time, she's at night and sleeping during the day, so their time together is very small and very minimal. And they're trying to save enough money just to start a family, have a child. So that's the reason why, Ms. Brown.
Ms. Goodman, Mr. Chair.
Shirley.
I think there's a miscommunication. I don't believe things go on consent agenda when 3 people agree to it. When we know that there is disagreement, those things normally go on new business. I did not understand from our discussion in the workshop at the insurance that you felt that the insurance rate was inaccurate, that it was wrong. I know that you felt that we should do something about those employees who will be affected. And it won't be the regular employees, it will be only those employees that have the family plans. And that isn't something that is this issue. I mean, that's something else. I mean, if we want to change something to correct that, that would have to be done with the union to either give the employees a raise. We can't do that without negotiating with the union. If we don't want to increase the insurance rates, then we have to cut benefits. Again, that's something that we can't do. That has to be done with the union. So those things would have to be negotiated. So I come back to, what about this policy or the rate increase do you feel is inaccurate? The rate increase is what the rate increase is. And if you feel that that's inaccurate, or that you don't want us to go forward with that, you want us to change that, to go back to the union and either tell the union, well, we want you to either cut the benefits, or we want you to increase the salaries, or somehow cover more of what we give those on the family plan, because I think the union has been very clear in the past that they support covering their employees, and that the employees have to cover their families, because not all the union members use the family coverage, and they think that that's an unfair advantage to those who are if we gave more to those on the family plan. So the union in the past has not been willing to support additional coverage for those on the family plan, additional pay, I'm sorry. But again, it gets back to you can, the dollars, the amount, it is what it is. The opinion that you have about it, that we should do something about it for those families, that is something that I think could be handled in the comments. Pull an item for comment. I did not hear anything from you at that workshop that indicated to me that you would be voting against the information that staff brought us as to what the increases will have to be. I heard from you what I just heard now, how you object to the impact it's going to have on those employees who have a family plan. And those things we can't change without input or working with the union. Those things have to be done with the union. And again, if you want to pull something to be able to vote no against it, you can. It just has to be done by the Friday before, according to procedure.
And then let's wrap this up, because I think we've spent enough time. And I don't mean to cut you off, Mrs. Brown, but I think we've discussed this enough. So I'm going to
have to, so it's going to be on the consent agenda, so I have to vote no for the entire consent agenda if I don't agree with it?
Yes.
Oh. Wow.
Yes, because we have talked about this time and again all summer, and every board meeting there's something that's brought up that is pulled at the last minute. Just please respect the board enough to do things according to the timeline. You could look at that. I can't imagine that you haven't looked at it. Yeah, there might be an exception that falls outside of that Friday deadline, but every time all summer long, has there been an exception that fell outside of it? No. And I really think that you're making a point, and the point that you're making is attention. And I don't know why you're doing this, Eric.
I think you're playing political games.
But I don't know why you're doing this. This is the way that the board operates, the signs of the board and how the board operates. If you were on any other board, the board is that you operate along, expected to do certain things in protocol. And this is one of those things. It's nothing personal, Eric.
It's a gotcha game, Ms. Goodwin.
I just want to add, I thank you for allowing me to pull that one item last time. It was without issue, without incident, and I think I want to point that out as a comparison, because it was done quickly, and it was not an issue. It wasn't a gotcha. It just allowed for anything else, and I just think that we spend more time about,
But again, when I made that motion to do that, I said, let's get this over with and let's stop this. In the future, let's follow procedure.
What do you?
When I made the motion to go ahead and pull that,
I didn't have to make a motion. The chair just allowed me to pull an item, and we discussed it. It was at the last meeting.
I thought I did make the motion.
Well, whatever it was, I know that I've made exceptions all summer, and I really think that we need to get back to certain guidelines. You know, it's like maybe I shouldn't say this, but it's like color inside the lines. You have a board, the board's procedures are such, and it really makes for a better working board. This is a living organism, the board. It's 5 of us. Yes, we may have certain ideas that we find that are separate from other board members, But once we vote on something and the board votes on it, then it's left up to us to all go out and support whatever
Well,
that
we
is.
haven't voted on it yet.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about other things, Eric. But say, for example, the police department. We all didn't agree on that, and now we have a police department. So it's up to all of us to go out and support our police department.
But you shouldn't put things in the consent agenda that you know people don't support, that it's not going to be unanimous.
I'm saying if it's the board as a working organism that says these are the procedures that we abide by, please be respectful to the board and abide by those procedures. That's all I'm saying.
There should be a procedure that agendas should not be on the consent agenda if it's controversial.
Excuse me. I think we're back to that same thing. Eric, we had the discussion. I thought, and I asked, what is it about this item, not the personal issues about somebody's salary or making those changes. Here is what the insurance is going to cost us, or what it's projected to cost us. That's what we're voting on. And if you have a problem with that specific issue, if you think something in that is wrong, not that you think it's bad because we've got employees that don't make a lot of money, that's a different issue. I mean, we go through this and you go, I've set up my mind, this is the way I've made up my mind, and this is the way it's going to be, and I'm not going to change it. I don't care who asks me, who tells me what to do. I'm going to do what I want to do and make a statement about it.
Eric.
So I have another comment. Different issue. Are we done with that issue?
I hope.
So my next issue is going to be just as controversial. So we going to, everybody agrees on stuff. Well, we had an issue about public comment, and we talked about it, and it seemed to me that we kind of agreed to discuss it further.
Yes.
And that we weren't going to, I was of the impression that we weren't going to change anything. We were going to discuss it further. That not that it died, but that it just needed to be fleshed out more. And then when I was on that podium, it ends up getting changed. I mean, where the place, public comment, you couldn't hear people. I mean, you're talking about collectively agree on something. Once we collectively agree on something, you move forward. Okay? It's got to be consistent. Everybody just sat there and said, when you collectively agree on something, so we all collectively agreed on we weren't going to change anything. And then what happened? It got changed.
We didn't make that decision. The superintendent and his staff made that decision to change it.
That was done based on a recommendation from the chief of police that the location of public comment be changed. There was a issue with audio, so we moved back to the podium, but we've resolved that issue. The podium will be located here. Public comment is to address the board. It's not an opportunity to address the public. You're speaking to the board. We've moved the podium so that they can address the board, but it also is done specifically at the request of our chief of police. He believes it's better practice from a safety and security perspective.
And I did have that on our agenda to discuss this morning, but we've run out of time.
But somebody didn't test that. I mean, I'm just telling you, I didn't know this, just so everybody's edification.
Yes.
So I was watching it live stream on YouTube. But anyways, there's a chat function on the YouTube while you're live streaming it. And there was like 17 people chatting. I didn't realize, because you're up here on the board, you don't realize what's occurring, but I don't know if you guys realize that. So there's a chat function on there, and I understand it's only 17, it's the internet, but it was not our finest hour when people came up to, it wasn't a positive conversation they were saying, and to have their microphone not go out during that time, right, for that was embarrassing for that was not the school district's finest hour. Agreed, technical difficulties. I'm sure it was an accident. I'm sure it wasn't planned, but it was not our finest hour when that occurred, and it was a lot of embarrassing comments during that process. I just think that it wasn't our finest hour.
Jane, there were
Caroline.
4 or 5 people that couldn't be heard. And as soon as we realized that, when staff came out of the back and they could not fix Mike and the podium over here. We moved the people for over there, and there were only, seriously, like 5 people. I don't know where 17, and I've, you know.
Talking about the number of chats.
There was a chat people.
But I saw you on Facebook also, and on Facebook you were saying there were X amount of people that couldn't be heard, and blah, 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 blah. There were 4 or 5 people.
Oh, you know, one of the other things we were talking about in public comment was having the comments that relate to the agenda first, and then having, you know, what some people call open mic items after the agenda, so that those people that are here for specific items that they may need to make a presentation to the board or something on, the, you know, so that they can go. You know, I don't know if we've made any thought about that, because
We haven't discussed it, and where I saw that happening is Pasco and Hillsborough County, that they are doing that, and actually not recording those last session. I know City of Sarasota also does 2 different hearing of citizens.
I'm sorry, I may have missed that. Not
recording the second one.
No, I think we should record them, but I just think those that are pertinent to the agenda should be in the beginning, and you know, and those that aren't agenda items, perhaps after the agenda.
We can discuss that at another time, not at this one, because we've completely run out of town.
I've had it to discuss, but we've
run out of time.
I have one more thing I want to share.
One more quick.
Yes, Rachel. I just want to make sure, again, this is something that I don't think the board realizes because you were up there, but there came a time where you guys did switch over to here.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lady who I guess had worked at the school district before, and then it came back, and she was talking, and she had a bright colored shirt. It was about 35 minutes in. At that point, halfway through her speech, it cut off the YouTube. I know, and I'm just, so when I said that a bunch of people didn't get heard, it wasn't just the people at the podium. It was she from hers. It was cut off. Now the next day, the whole video was up. But if you were watching it live, after you moved over here,
Is that sort of like the Board of Education meeting that never gets on?
I don't know.
Live.
But I'm just letting you know, just so Ms. Zucker understands what I was talking about. So yes, there was the people at the podium, but then once the young lady was speaking, she said she worked for the school district for like 26 years. Her name. So that when that young lady was speaking, in the middle of her speech, it cut off, and so then I couldn't watch the rest of the meeting. So I had to wait till the next day, which was fine. But I just want to make sure Ms. Zucker.
Did you talk to Tracy Baker about some of these issues?
Well, I was in the middle of the Caribbean chasing a hurricane.
No, but I mean, since you've gotten back, did you talk to?
No, because the next day it got fixed.
Oh.
Next day when you got online, you were on YouTube, the entire video was up. My point was during the meeting, it was because Ms. Zucker brought up about me saying I couldn't hear people. It was the people at the podium, and then the people after where that young lady spoke for the rest of the meeting. Wasn't the live streaming. The next day, the entire YouTube was up. I just want to make sure Ms. Zucker understood where I was coming from when I said that.
Didn't sound like that on YouTube. Forget that.
Okay.
End it.
We've got to go in just a minute, but a couple of things. We did the delegation update the first Monday in September. And Sarasota County talked about some of their issues. I think that the one thing that was most interesting for us is that the EDC does have a platform, and they are interested in more money for CTE courses, and they're working on that and working with Tommy Gregory and some others to do some legislation about that. Is that funny?
Yeah, I'm just happy about EDC.
So I'm mentioning that. So that was a very good meeting, and we stayed to watch all of the different schools and higher education discuss some things. There are 59 students at the collegiate school in Venice, which is more than Carol Probst had felt would be entering the junior class this year. So that was good news for her. And we had an also brunch Sunday, September the 8th at the Hyatt, and we received an award as Partner of the Year. So we were very happy about that. Sonia Figueroa Alberts and I went to receive the award, and that was a really nice thing. And that's about it, I think, for me. I'm going to Washington next week to talk to legislators, and again, if there's anything that you all think of that perhaps we need to discuss, let me know. Anything else from Bridget, Eric, Dr. Bowden?
No, ma'am.
We're going to adjourn and go into a closed executive session with our attorney, and we're now adjourned, and our workshop is over, and our school board meeting will be starting at 3 o'clock in this room. Thank you. We're adjourned.